You can be in the same room with someone every day and still feel completely alone. It's the kind of loneliness that doesn't come from silence, but from being unseen. You smile, you nod, you go along, because somewhere along the way, you learn that keeping the peace costs less than speaking your truth. And little by little, you start doubting your own worth, because the person who promised to love you the most treats your needs like they're an inconvenience. This isn't about weakness. This is about surviving in a place where love has been replaced with control, where every gesture feels like a test you can't pass. And if you've been living like that, it's not just exhausting, it's soul draining. A lot of people live in relationships where the hurt isn't loud, it's quiet. It's in the way you feel dismissed when you speak, the way every conversation somehow turns back on you, the way your feelings are treated like they don't matter. And because it's not yelling or obvious cruelty, you start to wonder if maybe you're overreacting, if maybe this is just how marriage is supposed to feel. That's the trap. Narcissistic behavior can make you question your own reality, and it slowly erodes the trust you have in yourself. I want to bring some light to that, to name what's really happening so you can see it for what it is and decide what to do with a clear mind instead of a clouded heart. When love feels one-sided, it's not always because there's no love at all. Sometimes it's because the way love is being given and the way it's being received don't match. In a healthy relationship, there's a rhythm, a give and take, a balance where both people feel valued and secure. But when one person is constantly doing the giving patience, giving understanding, giving forgiveness, while the other takes without offering much back, that rhythm disappears. You start to feel like you're carrying the entire weight of the relationship on your own shoulders. It's not just about who does the dishes or who remembers birthdays. It's about who carries the emotional load, who listens without judgment, who notices when the other person is struggling and steps in to help. When that care is one way, the imbalance quietly wears you down. You might find yourself making excuses for them. Maybe they're stressed. Maybe they're just not good at showing affection. Maybe they'll come around if you try harder. But over time, trying harder turns into losing yourself. You start putting their needs ahead of your own, not because they've asked you to directly, but because the pattern has taught you that your needs won't be met if you don't. That's a heavy truth to face, realizing that the person you love isn't meeting you in the middle. And because you're the one holding things together, you also carry the guilt of wondering if it's somehow your fault. In these moments, it's easy to confuse one-sided love with devotion. You tell yourself, this is what commitment looks like, or real love is unconditional. And while it's true that love is patient and love is kind, it's also true that love is reciprocal. When you're the only one putting in the emotional labor, it stops being love in action and starts being survival in disguise. The small signs are often the clearest. The way you have to ask for reassurance instead of it being offered freely, the way you celebrate their wins while your own go unnoticed, the way your hurt is minimized while theirs becomes the center of the room. Sometimes the hardest part is that they might not even see it. They may genuinely believe they're doing enough because from their side, they're comfortable, they're being cared for, they're getting what they need. And unless they're willing to reflect on the relationship, they won't feel the same emptiness you do. That's why recognizing the imbalance matters. It's not about blaming or proving them wrong. It's about acknowledging the truth so you can make decisions with clarity instead of confusion. When love feels one-sided, it's not a sign to give up on yourself to save the relationship. It's a sign to start valuing yourself enough to ask for the same effort you give. Because real love, healthy love, doesn't require you to carry it alone. It meets you halfway, it notices when you're tired, and it wants to make the load lighter, not heavier. You deserve that balance, and you're allowed to expect it. The weight of being unheard doesn't come from one moment. It builds over time. It's the accumulation of all the conversations where you opened up and the other person looked at their phone, changed the subject, or brushed it off with a quick answer. It's when you share something important, not to start an argument, but just to be understood, and it gets met with silence or defensiveness. Little by little, you start holding things in, not because you don't have anything to say, but because you've learned that saying it won't make a difference. And that's a quiet kind of hurt that people don't always see from the outside. Being unheard isn't about winning a debate or getting your way. It's about wanting your thoughts and feelings to matter to the person who matters most to you. When that doesn't happen, it leaves you feeling invisible. And invisibility in a relationship is dangerous because it can turn into emotional isolation. You might still be talking every day about schedules, bills, and surface level things, but the deeper conversations, the ones where you share your fears, your frustrations, your dreams, those start disappearing. You stop bringing them up, and in doing so, a part of your connection disappears too. Sometimes the person who isn't listening doesn't realize the damage they're doing. They might hear the words you're saying, but not the meaning behind them. Or they listen only long enough to figure out their response instead of actually absorbing what you've shared. And in those moments, it feels like you're talking to a wall, not an angry wall, not even a cold one, just a wall that stands between you and being known. And when that happens enough times, you might start questioning your own voice. You might think, maybe I'm asking for too much, or maybe it's better if I just stay quiet. But staying quiet comes at a cost. You end up carrying everything inside, the unspoken disappointments, the small resentments, the needs that never get met because they're never acknowledged. And carrying that weight alone doesn't just make you tired, it changes the way you see yourself. If your words don't seem to matter to them, eventually you start wondering if they matter at all. That's the slow erosion of self-worth that happens when you're consistently unheard. The truth is, being heard isn't about perfection. It's not about someone agreeing with everything you say or always having the right answer. It's about presence. It's about the other person making the effort to slow down, put away distractions, and really take in what you're sharing. That effort tells you that you matter, that your voice matters. If you've been carrying the weight of being unheard, know that it's not because you're unworthy of attention or understanding. It's because somewhere along the way, the balance of listening and speaking got lost in your relationship, and balance can be rebuilt. But it starts with recognizing that your voice does deserve a place in the room, and you don't have to carry the silence alone. Living with constant criticism changes you in ways you don't notice at first. In the beginning, it might just be small comments. A remark about how you cook, the way you dress, how you said something in front of others. You brush it off, thinking they're just being particular, or maybe even trying to help. But over time, those comments add up. And it's not just the words that wear you down, it's the tone, the timing, the feeling that no matter what you do, it's never quite good enough. You start walking into every interaction on edge, already bracing yourself for the next critique. Criticism in a relationship isn't always loud or angry. Sometimes it's subtle, a sigh when you speak, a raised eyebrow, a small shake of the head. Other times it's wrapped in humor, like it's all just a joke, so you feel like you can't take it seriously without being called too sensitive. But your body knows the difference. Your mind knows. You can feel the sting in the moment, and it lingers long after the conversation ends. That's because constant criticism sends the same message over and over. Who you are as you are is somehow not enough. The real damage happens quietly. You start second-guessing yourself in areas you used to feel confident. You pause before sharing an idea, before trying something new, because you've learned that it's safer to do nothing than to do something and have it torn apart. You begin editing yourself, your words, your choices, even your personality, just to avoid triggering another round of judgment. And when you live like that long enough, you lose pieces of yourself without even realizing they're gone. It's important to understand that in a healthy relationship, feedback has a place. We all need to grow, and sometimes the people closest to us help us see things we can't see on our own. But there's a difference between feedback that builds you up and criticism that chips away at you. Healthy feedback comes from a place of care and respect. Constant criticism comes from a place of control, frustration, or unmet expectations. And when it's constant, it's not about helping you. It's about reshaping you to fit someone else's comfort. Living with constant criticism also affects trust. Not the trust that someone will tell you the truth, but the trust that they're for you. when you believe that the person you love is more focused on pointing out your flaws than celebrating your strengths, it's hard to feel safe being yourself around them. You might still love them, still want the relationship to work, but you start to protect yourself in small ways, keeping parts of your life, your thoughts, and your feelings to yourself because it feels safer that way. No one thrives under a microscope, and you shouldn't have to trade your sense of self just to keep the peace. If you've been living with constant criticism, it's not about trying harder to be perfect. It's about recognizing that you deserve to be seen for more than your mistakes and loved for more than your potential. Healthy love notices what's good, not just what could be better, and you have the right to expect that kind of love in your life. Trust rarely disappears all at once. Most of the time it fades in small, almost invisible ways. A promise that gets broken, even if it's about something small. A conversation where the truth is bent just enough to make you question what's real. A moment when you needed them to show up, and they didn't. None of these moments on their own might seem like enough to break a relationship, but together, they begin to chip away at the foundation. And the thing about trust is, once those cracks start forming, you can't help but notice them. You start listening differently, watching more closely, reading between the lines of every word they say. When trust is strong, you don't have to work to believe the other person. You just do. Their words feel steady, their actions match what they promise, and you can rest in the security that they're on your side. But when trust starts to fade, that rest is replaced with tension. You catch yourself double, checking their stories, wondering about their motives, and second, guessing whether they really mean what they say. You might still want to believe them, but there's a hesitation now, a pause in your heart before you give them the benefit of the doubt. In a marriage or long-term relationship, losing trust can feel especially disorienting because you've built so much of your life on the belief that this person is safe for you. You've shared your vulnerabilities, your fears, your future plans, all under the assumption that they will handle them with care. And when their actions tell you otherwise, even in small ways, it shakes not just your faith in them, but sometimes your faith in yourself. You start wondering, did I miss the signs? Am I being too cautious now or not cautious enough? That self-doubt can be as heavy as the broken trust itself. The slow erosion of trust changes how you show up in the relationship. You might begin holding back parts of yourself, not out of spite, but out of self-protection. You become less open, less vulnerable, less willing to rely on them for the things you used to. You might stop sharing certain thoughts or stop asking for help because a part of you has decided it's safer to manage on your own than risk being let down again. On the surface, it might look like distance. Underneath, it's self-preservation. Rebuilding trust isn't easy, but it starts with honesty, not just in words, but in consistent actions over time. It's showing up when you say you will. It's telling the truth even when it's uncomfortable. It's admitting mistakes and making amends without being asked. And it's listening when the other person says, "I'm hurt," without turning it into a debate. If you've been watching trust slowly disappear in your relationship, you're not imagining it. You're feeling the absence of something that used to make you feel safe. And while trust can be rebuilt, it's okay to acknowledge that its loss has left a mark, because naming that reality is the first step to deciding whether it's something you both can and will work to restore. When affection becomes conditional, it changes the way love feels. At first, you may not even notice it happening. Maybe in the early days, affection was natural. A hug when you walked in the door, a hand on your shoulder when you were stressed, and "I love you" for no reason at all. But slowly, those moments start to feel tied to something. You get a hug when you've done something they like. You hear "I love you" when you've met their expectations. And when you fall short in their eyes, the warmth disappears. It's not always spoken out loud, but the message is clear. My affection is a reward, not a constant. Conditional affection creates an environment where you start to measure everything you do against how they might respond. You learn the patterns. When they're more likely to be kind, when they're more likely to withdraw, you find yourself working harder to earn the moments of closeness because those moments have become scarce and unpredictable. And the hardest part is that the very thing that should be your safe place, love, starts to feel like a performance you have to maintain. In a healthy relationship, affection is not a transaction. It's given freely, even in hard moments, because it's not about what the other person did or didn't do. It's about connection, commitment, and care that doesn't depend on perfection. But when affection becomes conditional, it shifts the power in the relationship. One person becomes the giver, deciding when and how love will be shown. The other becomes the seeker, constantly trying to meet the terms, often without even knowing exactly what those terms are. Living in that dynamic chips away at your sense of security. You start wondering, if I make a mistake, will they still love me the same? You second guess expressing your needs or frustrations because you've learned that even bringing up a concern could mean days without tenderness. You might stay silent in moments when you should speak just to avoid losing what little closeness you have. And over time, this doesn't just make you feel unloved, it makes you feel unsafe in your own relationship. The truth is, conditional affection often says more about the person giving it than the one receiving it. Sometimes it's a form of control, even if they don't see it that way. Sometimes it's how they learn to express love based on their own experiences. But regardless of the reason, the impact is the same. Love starts to feel uncertain, and uncertainty in love is exhausting. If you've been in this place, you know it's not about wanting constant praise or nonstop attention. It's about wanting to know that love is still there when things are imperfect, when you mess up, when you disagree, when life gets messy. Real love doesn't withhold to make a point. It stays steady even when it's hard, and you deserve to feel that steadiness, not as something you have to earn, but as something you can count on without question. Walking on eggs around the person you love is one of the most exhausting ways to live. It's not just about avoiding arguments. It's about constantly scanning the emotional temperature of the room, watching every word, every expression, every tone of voice you use. You start replaying conversations in your head, wondering if you said something the wrong way, or if they're going to be upset later. And it's not because you want to live this way. It's because somewhere along the line, you learned that even the smallest misstep can turn into a big reaction. This kind of environment changes how you show up in the relationship. You're not relaxed. You're not free to be yourself. Instead, you become cautious, calculated, always trying to anticipate what might set them off. You choose your words based on what will keep the peace, not what's actually true to how you feel. And after a while, that starts to feel normal, like this is just what love requires. But deep down, you know, love shouldn't feel like a constant balancing act where one wrong move could make the whole thing fall apart. The hard part is that walking on eggshells doesn't just protect the other person from discomfort. It also erases you. You start shrinking your personality, hiding your real opinions, and avoiding your own needs just to make sure they stay comfortable. It's a slow disappearance of your authentic self, and it's easy to lose sight of when you're in it. You might even start blaming yourself for their reactions, telling yourself, if I just phrase it differently, or if I just keep my feelings to myself, then things will be fine. But fine isn't the same as healthy. Sometimes the person you're tiptoeing around may not even realize the effect they're having. They might think you're just easygoing or not the type to complain, because they're not seeing the emotional work you're doing behind the scenes to avoid conflict. Other times they do know, and that unspoken control becomes part of the dynamic. Either way, the result is the same. You end up carrying the weight of the relationship stability almost entirely on your own. The truth is, relationships can't thrive without emotional safety. And safety doesn't mean avoiding every disagreement. It means knowing you can speak honestly without fear of punishment, silent treatment, or an emotional explosion. When you can't do that, you're not building intimacy, you're managing damage. And managing damage is survival mode, not connection. If you've been walking on eggs around someone you love, it's worth asking yourself what it's costing you. Not just in terms of stress or energy, but in terms of your voice, your confidence, and your ability to trust that love can handle the truth. Because love that can't handle honesty will always keep you small, and you are allowed to be fully yourself in your own relationship, without fear that one wrong word will shatter the peace. Losing yourself to keep the peace often starts as a choice that feels loving. You tell yourself, it's not worth the argument, or I'll just let this go. You pick your battles, you compromise, you stay quiet when something bothers you, all in the name of harmony. At first, it even feels like the right thing to do. You believe you're protecting the relationship, avoiding unnecessary tension. But over time, those small silences start to add up. You're not just letting things go anymore, you're letting pieces of yourself go. The shift is subtle. Maybe you stop talking about certain topics because you know they'll cause a reaction. You adjust your preferences. Where you go, what you eat, how you spend your time, to match theirs even when it's not what you want. You stop sharing your true feelings because you've learned they might be dismissed, minimized, or turned into a conflict. Slowly, without realizing it, you start living in a version of the relationship where your comfort, your voice, and your needs come second. And while it might keep things peaceful on the surface, inside, you feel a quiet ache that never really goes away. What makes this so tricky is that from the outside, it can look like you're just easygoing or selfless. People might even admire your ability to keep things smooth. But they don't see the cost. They don't see the way you bite your tongue when you're hurt, or the way you carry resentment that has nowhere to go. They don't see how much effort it takes to keep a relationship balanced when all the balancing is being done on your side. That's the hidden weight of keeping the peace. It's heavy, and you're carrying it alone. Over time, this way of living can erode your sense of identity. You might wake up one day and realize you're not sure what you like anymore, what you think anymore, or even who you are outside of the relationship. That loss of self isn't sudden. It's the result of years of making yourself smaller so the relationship can feel bigger. And when you live that way long enough, even your definition of love starts to change. You begin to believe that love means sacrificing yourself, that being a good partner means never making waves. But real peace isn't built on one person disappearing. True peace in a relationship comes from honesty, respect, and the ability to work through differences together. That kind of peace doesn't require you to hide. It invites you to be fully seen. It's not about avoiding discomfort. It's about knowing you can walk through it together without losing the connection. If you've been losing yourself to keep the peace, it's not because you're weak. It's because you care deeply, and somewhere along the way, you decided that protecting the relationship meant protecting the other person from your truth. But your truth matters. Your needs matter, and the right kind of love will make room for them without asking you to disappear in the process. The cost of emotional distance isn't something you feel all at once. It's not one big event. It's the quiet accumulation of moments when connection could have been made, but wasn't. It's when you reach for them and they're too distracted to notice. It's when you share something personal and they give a short answer or no answer at all. It's the silence that fills the room after an argument because neither of you knows how or is willing to bridge the gap. At first, you tell yourself it's just a rough patch, but over time, those misconnections stop feeling temporary and start feeling like the new normal. Emotional distance doesn't always mean there's anger or open conflict. Sometimes it's just nothing. Conversations stay on the surface. Eye contact becomes rare. Affection feels like an obligation rather than something freely given. And while life keeps moving, bills get paid, errands get done, schedules get managed, the emotional current that once ran between you starts to dry up. You might still be in the same room, but it feels like you're living in different worlds. That's the hidden cost. You're together, but not really with each other. The danger is how easy it is to adjust to that emptiness. Humans are adaptable, and you can get used to almost anything, even a lack of intimacy. You tell yourself you're fine, that this is just what long-term relationships look like. But underneath that acceptance is a quiet grief. You miss what you used to have, the late night talks, the spontaneous laughter, the way their presence used to make you feel lighter. You miss feeling seen without having to ask for it, and missing all of that while acting like you don't is exhausting. Sometimes emotional distance happens because one or both people are hurt and haven't found a way to work through it. Sometimes it's stress or business or unspoken resentment that builds over time. And sometimes it's the slow erosion that comes from neglect, not out of malice, but out of assuming the relationship will take care of itself. But relationships don't run on autopilot. If they're not intentionally nurtured, they drift. And the longer the drift, the harder it becomes to find your way back. The cost isn't just in the relationship, it's in you. Emotional distance can make you question your worth, your desirability, your importance to the other person. It can make you pull back as well, not out of punishment, but out of self-preservation. You stop sharing the deeper parts of yourself because you've learned they won't be met with the same openness you're craving. And with every withheld thought, every moment you choose silence over vulnerability, the space between you grows wider. Closing that space takes more than just spending time together. It takes presence, curiosity, and a willingness to be uncomfortable. It means choosing to have the conversations you've been avoiding, not to assign blame, but to rebuild connection. Because the real cost of emotional distance isn't the quiet, it's the loss of intimacy, trust, and safety. And reclaiming those things starts with both people deciding that the space between them isn't where they want to live. When your needs are always last, it doesn't usually happen because of one big decision. It happens in 100 small ways over time. You skip the thing you wanted to do because they're tired. You hold off on talking about what's bothering you because they're stressed. You agree to plans you didn't want to make because it's easier than saying no. And somewhere in the middle of all that, you learn to adjust, to bend, to make space for their wants, their preferences, their comfort, even when it comes at the expense of your own. At first, it feels like compromise. But compromise is supposed to go both ways. When it doesn't, it's not compromise anymore. It's neglect, and you're the one being neglected. The hard part is, you might not even realize it's happening until you look back and notice the pattern. You can remember moments when you needed support, when you were tired, or when you were struggling, and instead of being met with care, you found yourself taking care of them instead. You learn quickly that if something has to give, it will be you. That's a heavy truth to carry in a relationship that's supposed to feel safe. Being last on the list doesn't just affect your time and energy, it affects your sense of worth. Over time, you start to internalize the idea that your needs matter less. You hesitate to speak up because you've been taught by the pattern that it won't change anything. You start talking yourself out of wanting things in the first place. It's fine, I don't really need that, becomes your default response, not because it's true, but because it feels easier than asking. Sometimes, the other person might not see what's happening. They're so used to you adjusting and accommodating that they stop noticing it's even a sacrifice. Other times, they do see it, but assume you're okay with it because you don't complain. Either way, the result is the same. You end up in a relationship where one person is consistently being cared for and the other is consistently doing the caring. The danger is that living like this can slowly drain the connection. Resentment builds quietly. You start feeling less like a partner and more like a support system. And that's not what a healthy relationship is built on. You might still love them deeply, but love without mutual care eventually runs thin. And when you've been running on empty long enough, it's hard to keep showing up the same way you used to. Putting your needs first sometimes doesn't make you selfish. It makes you human. In a healthy relationship, both people are allowed to have needs, and both people take turns meeting them. That's how trust grows. That's how intimacy deepens. If you've been living in a pattern where your needs are always last, it's worth remembering that your well-being matters just as much as theirs. You deserve to be heard, to be cared for, and to know that your place in the relationship isn't just to support. It's to be supported too. There's a particular kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being by yourself. It comes from being right next to someone and still feeling like you're on your own. You're sharing the same space, maybe even the same couch, but there's a wall there you can't seem to break through. The conversations have become surface level. The silences feel heavier than they used to. You catch yourself wanting to reach for their hand, but wondering if they'd even notice. And that's the part that hurts the most, not the quiet, but the distance hiding inside it. This kind of loneliness often doesn't show up all at once. It slips in gradually. Maybe life got busy, work, kids, stress, responsibilities. Maybe there were conflicts that never fully got resolved, so you started tiptoeing around certain topics. Maybe you've been holding things in because you're not sure how they'll respond. One small moment at a time, you start protecting yourself from disappointment by expecting less from them. You stop sharing as much, and in return, they stop asking as much. On the outside, nothing looks broken. On the inside, the connection you used to lean on feels thin. It's confusing because you still care about each other. You still do things together. You might even laugh at the same shows, plan the same vacations, attend the same events. But emotional closeness isn't about proximity. It's about being seen, being understood, and knowing the other person is tuned into you. Not just your presence, but your heart. When that's missing, you can feel like a stranger in your own relationship. The danger of feeling alone while together is that it can trick you into thinking this is just how things have to be. You tell yourself it's normal for the spark to fade, for conversations to be shorter, for the other person to be preoccupied. And yes, relationships go through quieter seasons, but quiet is different from disconnected. Quiet can still be warm. Disconnected feels cold even when they're sitting right next to you. When you feel this way, it's tempting to pull back even more, to protect yourself from the sting of rejection or the frustration of trying and not being met halfway. But that only widens the gap. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for the relationship and for yourself is to name what's happening. Not as an accusation, but as an invitation. Something as simple as, "I miss feeling close to you," can open the door to a different kind of conversation. It's also important to look inward. Are you showing up in the way you want them to show up for you? Are you making space for connection? Or are you both caught in the grind of getting through each day? Rebuilding closeness takes two people willing to be present again, not just physically, but emotionally. It's about choosing to turn toward each other, to listen with intention, to let your guard down just enough for them to see the real you again. Because being together should feel like togetherness. And if it doesn't right now, that doesn't mean it's gone forever. It means there's a place to start.